Okay, so here we are. We are ready with both of our files on our desktop. The first thing that we want to do is we want to install VirtualBox software. In order to create virtual machine, we must first have the software installed, so let us do that first. If we double click on it, it will start the process of installation, which should look the same whether you're running Windows, Mac OS or Linux. The process of installation VirtualBox will be the same. And it is rather easy, since all we want to do is we want to click on Next on each and every step, but just so we don't go next, let us explain what you can do with each and every step of installation. So here, as it says under the custom setup, we want to select the way we want our features to be installed. And the only thing that you might consider changing right here is this location part. If you want to change the location of VirtualBox, you can do that right here, but since I won't be doing that, I will just click on Next to proceed to the next step. Here you can select whether you want a shortcut on the desktop, whether you want start menu entries. I will leave all of this to be checked since I want all of that, and I will click on Next Step. For this step, it says that during the installation we might be disconnected from the internet in case you're downloading or uploading something important, so best thing you can do in that case is wait for that download or upload to finish, and then you can proceed with the installation of VirtualBox. So I will just click on yes, since I'm not doing anything important over the internet, and I will click right here on install. This will ask me for my administrative password, and since I don't have one, I will simply just click on yes, and it will start the process of installing VirtualBox. This will finish in just a few seconds, and right after it, it should open up our VirtualBox. So just at this last step after installation, we want to click on finish, and in just a few seconds, this should open the VirtualBox. And here it is. So your Windows should look exactly like mine does, and what we want to do from here is we want to create the virtual machine. We're going to go onto this new button and click on it, which will open this small window that will ask us for some information about our virtual machine. So under the name, we're going to specify Kali Linux, and you can name it anything you want. It doesn't have to be Kali Linux, but just in case you might have multiple machines in VirtualBox later on, you want to have them named properly so you know which machine is which. Next thing, the machine folder is something that we don't want to change. The type we want to set on Linux, and you will notice if you typed Kali Linux, it should automatically set the type to be Linux. And the version is something that we do want to change. Now, since Kali Linux is a Debian-based operating system, we want to be searching Debian right here. And here it is. We got Debian 32-bit and Debian 64-bit. If you downloaded the 64-bit version of Kali Linux, you want to select right here Debian 64-bit. And if you downloaded the 32-bit one, you would be selecting Debian 32-bit. After we got all of these options set like this, we want to click on Next. And this next step is, if you remember, we talked about that we need to give our hardware resources to our virtual machine. And right here it asks us how much RAM memory are we willing to borrow to the virtual machine to use. This RAM memory will not be available as long as our virtual machine is running, and once the virtual machine has been shut down, this RAM memory will be freed for our physical machine to use. Now, on this machine that I'm recording, I have 8 GB of RAM. So, in the best case, I want to give about 2 GB of RAM to this virtual machine. Now, I can also go up to 4 GB of RAM, but it is not really needed, and there is no point in giving half of your RAM memory to your virtual machine. So, 2 GB of RAM will be more than enough for my virtual machine. If your machine has 16 GB of RAM or 32 GB of RAM, feel free to give it even more RAM memory, as the more the better. And if your machine has less than 8 GB of RAM, for example it has 4 GB of RAM, then you can either go with 2 GB or you can even lower it to 1 GB of RAM. But I will simply just leave it on 2, and I will proceed to the next step. In the next step, we're creating the hard disk, so we want to select this option that says create a virtual hard disk now, and keep in mind that the recommended size of the hard disk is 8 GB. This option will come later on, but just keep it in mind. So create the virtual hard disk now, click on Create, and under the hard disk file type, we want to select VirtualBox disk image. Click on Next. This next question is asking us how we want to store our data on our virtual hard disk, whether we want fixed size or dynamically allocated. Keep in mind that fixed size will probably work faster, but it will also take longer time to create, while the dynamically allocated might work a little bit slower, but it will be created a lot faster. It is completely up to you. In this case, I will simply just go with dynamically allocated and I will click on Next. And here is where we choose the virtual hard disk size and the file location. So here you can change the location of your virtual hard disk or simply of your virtual machine. And down here you can select how much gigabytes you want to give to your virtual machine to use as a hard disk. It said before that 8 gigabytes is recommended, but I would advise you to not go below 20 gigabytes. For the purposes of this course, I will even go up to 30 gigabytes, but you don't really have to if you don't want. Just keep in mind that you might be using this machine later on, even after this course, and you might be downloading more and more files, so if you can, make sure to give it more than it is recommended. Once you select your hard disk size, you want to click on Create. And this will create our virtual machine. As you can see right here, we got Kali Linux added, and here are all of the details about our virtual machine. Before we proceed and start it, there is only one more thing that we want to do. Remember this ISO image or this operating system? We need to somehow add it to our virtual machine, so that once we install the operating system, it knows which one to install. So to do that, we navigate back to VirtualBox, we select the virtual machine, and we click on Settings. Now you will notice that there are a bunch of settings right here, which we are going to explain later on, but for now on, you want to navigate to the storage, and here is where we want to add our ISO image of Kali Linux. To do that, we want to go to this controller IDE, and this empty part, we want to right-click and remove attachment. It will ask us, are we sure that we want to delete it? We click on Remove, and after it, we want to click on this disk shape with a plus. Just click on it, and it will open up this smaller window where we want to find our Kali Linux ISO image and select it. In case you don't see it right here, you want to click on Add, and you can simply just find it on your machine. In my case, as we can see, it is right here in the download section, but in your case, if you moved it to a desktop, it will probably be on desktop as well. Since I have it in both locations, I will select the desktop one, double click it, and you will see it being added right here. Then you select it here, and click on Choose. You should see it being added right here under the controller IDE, as it says Kali Linux 2020.2. And once you see it, you can simply just click on OK. And now our virtual machine is fully created. All we are left to do in the next video is to install the Kali Linux operating system. After that, we're going to be ready to use our hacking machine. Okay, finally, we got to the part where we will install our machine with all the interesting hacking tools that we will use. Hopefully, you're excited since by the end of this video, you will have your Kali Linux machine running and ready to use. Here in our VirtualBox, in order to start the process of installation, we must first select our virtual machine and then click on this Start button right here. This will start our virtual machine and it will start the process of installation of operating system. Okay, so let me enlarge this, even though the screen of the installation will stay smaller size, but that is just during the installation, so don't worry. And right here in the installer menu, we're interested in two different options. Either graphical install or install. They're pretty much the same, just graphical install is prettier, so that's why we're going to go with that one. Click here Enter. The next thing it asks us is to choose the language, and for the purposes of this course, I will proceed with English, and you can pick whichever language you want. So just select whichever language you want. I will select English and I will click on Continue. In the location part, this is only important if you want to have the correct time zone correspondent with your country. And right here, it also tells us that these countries from which we can choose are strictly based on the language that we picked in the previous step. So in case your country is not on the list, like mine isn't, you can go right here on Other and select your country. If it is on the list, select it and click on Continue. Now, since this really isn't that important step, I will just proceed with the United States. And here under the configuration of the keyboard, I will select American English and I will click on Continue. After setting up our keyboard, the installation process will configure some stuff required for our machine to run, and you will notice most of the stuff is done automatically, so we don't need to worry about it too much. Whenever a certain question pops up, I will tell you what you need to select to proceed to the next step of installation. Okay, so after a few seconds, here is the first question. Let us read what it wants from us. So it says, please enter the hostname for this system, and the hostname is a single word that identifies your system to the network. If you don't know what your hostname should be, consult your network administrator. If you're setting up your own home network, you can make something up here. Okay, so we're not network administrators, therefore we can just make something up as a hostname, so let us just go with Cali. Why not? And let us go on Continue. Domain name, this is something that we want to leave empty, so just delete everything right here and proceed to the next step. Okay, so we got setup users and password step. Now, in the previous versions of Kali Linux, it usually asked you to set up the password for the root account. And unlike, for example, on Windows, we got the user accounts and administrator. On Linux, we got the user accounts and a root account. What a root account is basically the same as an administrator in Windows. It has elevated privileges, it can execute commands that user's account cannot execute, and in this newest version of Kali Linux, we are required to set up a user account. So here we got the step where we need to specify full name for the new user, and it tells us that specifying our full name would be a reasonable choice, and if it was any other course instead of a hacking course, I would also tell you to specify your name here. But I must teach you to also think like a hacker, and we hackers want to stay as low-key as possible, so specifying our real name is not an option for us here. We can just make something up instead. Let us go with Mr. Hacker. Why not? Let's click on Continue, and the username we can also leave to be Mr. Hacker. There's nothing really to change here. Of course, if you want, you can specify something other than Mr. Hacker. It is completely up to you. Just make sure you remember the username, since you will need it to log into your machine after the installation. So I will leave it on Mr. Hacker and click on Continue. And here is the step where we need to choose a password. Now, password is the important stuff. We must make sure we choose a strong password for any type of account we create. Let me tell you one interesting fact. A lot of black hat hackers were caught because they had a weak password. We are white hat hackers, but it is still a good practice to always choose a long and strong password. So let us do it. I will type mine right here and re-enter the password. I will type it once again. You can choose any password that you want. In case you want to make sure that you typed what you wanted to type, you can click right here, Show Password in Clear, as well as in the second step, you can also check Show Password in Clear. And after you choose your password, you can click on Continue. So here, configure the clock. You can select your time zone. I will go with Eastern. And here, after loading a few more additional components, it should ask us about disk partitioning. Here in the partitioning disk, we have a few options, and we're interested in the first one, which is guided to use entire disk. We're not really interested in encrypted hard disks or anything like that, so just select Use Entire Disk and click on Continue. Here we get a warning that all data on the disk you select will be erased. And this right here is a hard disk that we created in the previous video when I created my virtual machine. And you remember that I gave around 30 gigabytes to my virtual hard disk, so this is that one, and I will select it and click on continue. Here it gives us some of the options as to how the disk can be partitioned. We will proceed with first option, which is all files in one partition, which is also recommended for new users. Don't worry about these other two options which mention /home, /var, /tmp. These are all just standard Linux directories, which we will see shortly after installation. So just click right here, all files in one partition, click on continue. The final steps are finish partitioning and write changes to the disk. We want to click on continue there as well. And right here it will just ask us, are we sure that we want to write the changes to the disk? We want to select right here yes, and we want to click on continue. So after clicking on continue, the installation process will start and it will take some time. It can take possibly around 20 to 30 minutes, maybe even longer, and it will also ask us a couple more questions in meantime. I will fast forward to the first question that pops up, and you just pause the video until you get to that step of installation. Okay, so here is the next question, configuring the package manager, and it asks us for the HTTP proxy information. Leave blank for none, and we do want to leave blank, so we're not going to type anything here, and we're going to click on continue. Here in the software selection, we want to leave all of the checked things, and we also want to add the large option. So leave everything checked that you see right here, and click right here on large. What this will do is it will install additional tools in our Cal Linux, and we want as many hacking tools installed with our operating system, so we don't have to waste time installing them later on. So just double check that all of these options are checked, desktop environment, XFCE, these lower three, and the large option as well should be checked. After you get all of that, click on continue. And this step of installing software will take some time. So just go grab a cup of coffee or take some snack, and I will see you in around 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, so after a long installation, here is another question. And it asks us, should we install the grub bootloader to the master boot record? First of all, what is grub? Well, grub bootloader is a software that loads Linux kernel. It is the first software that is started at system boot. Let us read what it asks us here. It seems that this new installation is the only operating system on this computer. If so, it should be safe to install the grub bootloader to the master boot record of your first hard drive. Warning: if the installer fails to detect another operating system that is present on your computer, modifying the master boot record will make that operating system temporarily unbootable, though grub can be manually configured later to boot it. We want to click here, yes. And you might be asking, wait Alexa, but I'm running other operating systems. I'm running macOS or Windows. Don't worry, remember, this is a virtual machine. It doesn't know about your main operating system. For this virtual machine, this is the only operating system that is being installed. So it is safe to select yes and proceed to the next step. And in here, we want to select /dev/sda and click on continue. This will proceed to finish up our installation, and it might ask us a question or two more, and then we should be ready to use our Cal Linux machine. Okay, and this final step says installation complete, so it is time to boot into your new system. Make sure to remove the installation media so that you boot into the new system rather than restarting the installation. Since we don't have any installation media, and this is probably referring to a USB drive in case you installed an operating system over USB, and we didn't, we installed it in virtual machine, so we can simply just click on continue. This will finish up the installation, and then it will reboot our machine and open up our Cal Linux desktop. Here it is, our virtual machine is starting up for the first time. Finally, here is our login screen to our Cal Linux machine. Here we want to input the username that we typed in during the installation, so in my case it is Mr. Hacker. And down here you want to input the password that you used during the installation. Then you can click on Login. And here it is, our first hacking machine. Now, in case you're wondering why is it smaller screen, well, to fix that, in most cases you can simply just do this, lower the screen, and then enlarge it once again, and now it should be in full screen mode. In case this didn't work, don't worry, in the next video we're going to perform some of the checks of our virtual machine to check the internet connection, whether it is in full screen mode, and other things as well. So don't worry if your machine isn't in full screen mode, it will be after the next video.